The sun had barely risen over Deadwood, spilling a muted gold across the rough-hewn streets. Dust clung to every board and creaked under the boots of early risers, whispering of long-gone cattle drives and gunfights that had shaped the town. At the far edge of the main street, a boy crouched behind a splintered fence, his thin frame shivering as much from fear as from the crisp morning air. His name was Eli, and he had been on the run for days. A terrible fire had claimed his parents' homestead, leaving nothing but smoke, ash, and a hollow ache of loss that felt heavier than any stone. His small hands were scraped raw, his clothes were just patched scraps, and his heart was burdened with grief. Deadwood, as harsh as it was his last hope. Because somewhere in this town lived a man whose reputation could shield him. Sheriff Thomas Grayson. Grayson was a tall, stern figure, the kind of man whose shadow seemed to command respect even before he spoke a word. His office, a weathered building at the center of town, held the scent of pine, gun oil, and ink-stained ledgers. Most folks in Deadwood avoided asking for his kindness. They assumed the sheriff's heart had hardened years ago, the way the prairie hardens those who survive its storms. But Eli had no other choice. He approached cautiously, each step making a soft whisper on the wooden planks outside Grayson's office. The sheriff noticed immediately. His gray eyes swept over the boy like a hawk circling its prey. And in those eyes there was recognition, not of the boy himself, but of the fear and loneliness that mirrored the man's own lost childhood. "Boy," Grayson's voice was firm, but not unkind. "What brings you to Deadwood? You look like the wind's already had its way with you." Eli's voice caught in his throat. He wanted to ask for food, for shelter, for safety, but the words felt too heavy to lift. Instead he just nodded, shivering, and followed when Grayson gestured for him to come inside. The office was warm, and the smell of roasting coffee wrapped around him like a promise. A loaf of bread rested on the desk, and for the first time in days, Eli felt a flicker of something that resembled hope. Grayson crouched down slightly to meet his eyes. "You don't have to tell me everything right now," he said softly. "Eat first. We'll talk after." Days turned into weeks. Eli began to help around the office, delivering messages and running small errands. He learned to read the tracks of horses in the dust, and the subtle cues of the land from the man who was quickly becoming more than just a sheriff to him. Grayson's lessons went beyond mere survival. He taught patience, observation, and, perhaps most importantly, trust. Eli started to understand that care could exist without strings attached, that a man could extend his hand not out of obligation, but out of simple compassion. Yet their newfound peace was fragile. Rumors started to swirl through town like dust devils, whispers of a ruthless gang seeking revenge on Grayson for deeds long past. Their presence was an unspoken threat, lurking just beyond the horizon like a gathering storm cloud. The calm of Deadwood, as comforting as it was, now carried the sharp scent of impending danger. One evening, as the sun bled a deep crimson into the western sky, Eli sat by the office window, tracing the outline of his hands on the cool glass. Grayson set a tin of food beside him, his expression shadowed with thought. "They're coming," Grayson said, his voice low but steady. "And when they do, you'll need to remember strength is more than just muscle. It's knowing when to stand and when to follow." Eli swallowed hard, fear and resolve mingling in his chest. "Will they hurt us?" Grayson shook his head. "If they mean to, I'll handle it, but you'll ride with me tomorrow. You need to see that courage isn't about never being afraid." His hand brushed the revolver at his hip, more a reassurance than a threat. "It's about facing what you must." Night fell over Deadwood. Moonlight filtered through the cracks in the office walls, casting long, jagged shadows across the floor. Eli lay awake on his small cot, the sound of the wind whistling through the gaps in the building mingling with the fiery memories of his loss. But somewhere between the fear and the hope, he realized he wasn't alone anymore. A father, though not by blood, had chosen him. Them heard it. The distant sound of hooves, slow and deliberate, echoing across the empty streets. He saw Grayson's eyes darken. Eli's heart began to race. "They're here," Grayson whispered, moving with practiced, silent precision to his sidearm. "Stay down. Don't move until I say." The first gunshot shattered the quiet of Deadwood, splintering the night like fragile glass. Eli pressed himself to the floor, the echo in his chest as loud as the shot itself. In that single, terrifying instant, he understood that life in Deadwood had changed forever, and that he was about to learn what it truly meant to have a father. Thanks for watching. This is just the beginning of our story. If you want to find out what happens next, what secrets Sheriff Grayson is hiding, and how Eli survives the night, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We'll see you in part 2. The night had swallowed Deadwood whole. Shadows stretched across the street like dark skeletal fingers, and the wind carried that faint, metallic tang of gunpowder. I huddled behind the sheriff's desk, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Every little sound outside was magnified, sharpened by the sudden gunshot. Boots on the wooden planks outside the office. Grayson moved with a silent precision that was almost supernatural. Every step was measured, every motion practiced. He was the very picture of calm in the middle of a storm. "They're testing us," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper, but it cut through my fear. "One shot to scare, another to see if we're ready. Keep your head down, Eli." My small hands gripped the edge of the heavy oak desk. My mind was racing. I'd never faced real danger like this before. The fire that took my parents. That was chaos, impersonal, and swift. This was different. This was targeted, deliberate. And yet, standing in the shadow of Sheriff Grayson, the fear felt manageable. His quiet strength was like a shield, and it gave me a courage I didn't know I had. The gunshots faded as quickly as they had begun, leaving a ringing silence that pressed against my ears. Grayson peeked around the desk, his eyes methodically scanning the dark street. "They're waiting for morning," he concluded. "Smart man. Reckon they want to see how brave I am before they make their real move." He paused and his gaze fell on me. "And now," he added, "they'll also see how brave you can be." Morning came gray and cold, the kind of dawn that makes the prairie seem endless and merciless. Grayson saddled his horse, checking the rigging with meticulous care. Then he helped me onto the smaller, older mare he'd found for me. My stomach twisted into a tight knot of anticipation, but I did my best to mask it, trying to mirror the determination I saw on his face. "Stick close," Grayson instructed as he swung into his own saddle. "Watch their movements, watch mine, and remember the gun is only half the answer. You have to think, move, and survive." The town was eerily silent as we rode down the main street. Doors were shuttered, windows dark. Whispers of the gang's arrival had sent the residents scurrying into their homes, but we rode on undeterred. We were a shield and a spark, moving with a singular purpose toward the edge of town where fresh tracks led into the hills. It was there, in the long shadows of the ridges, that the first ambush came. 5 men materialized from behind boulders and broken timber, their rifles already raised. Grayson's eyes narrowed instantly. He dismounted with a fluid, practiced motion, pulling me down beside him into cover. "Stay low and follow my lead," he said, his voice calm. There was no trace of panic in his tone, only cold resolve. My hands shook as I gripped the small revolver he had given me. I had spent the past weeks learning its weight, practicing my aim, but now it felt impossibly heavy, like the weight of responsibility itself. One of the men barked a challenge, and the sound made me flinch. But Grayson's voice cut through the tension, firm and commanding. "Stand down if you value your lives." The leader of the gang just laughed, a harsh, jagged sound that grated on the quiet morning air. "We're here for more than talk, Grayson. Hand the boy over." "He's got something of ours." My eyes widened in confusion. "What does he mean?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Grayson's jaw tightened. "Some secrets from my past," he said grimly. "But you're not part of it." "Not yet." The confrontation escalated swiftly. Guns were raised, and the air crackled with hostility. But Grayson's strategy, honed through years of hard-won experience, allowed him to control the chaos. Shots rang out, dust kicked up into the air, and I felt myself pressed against the sheriff, sharing in his calm yet electric fear. The fight was as much a test of wits as it was of firepower, and I knew Grayson had no intention of letting a boy fall victim to his old enemies. When the dust finally settled, the gang had retreated back into the hills, leaving behind nothing but hoofprints, spent bullets, and that faint, acrid smell of gunpowder. I was shaken, adrenaline making my whole body tremble, but then Grayson's hand landed on my shoulder, and it grounded me. "You did well," he said quietly. "Braver than you know." The ride back to Deadwood was silent. We were both lost in our own thoughts. I couldn't stop replaying the moments of danger, the terror, and the strange, powerful bond I felt with the man riding beside me. For the first time I understood that courage could grow from trust, from being seen and guided by someone who actually cared. That night, As I lay beneath a rough blanket in the sheriff's office, the silence felt heavy. I finally found my voice. Why are you helping me? I'm nobody. Grayson, who had been staring into the fire, turned. The stern lines of his face softened, giving way to something tender, something I'd never seen before. Nobody? He said, his voice low. Boy, you've got more to offer this world than you realize. I lost my own son, years ago. I didn't think I'd ever find another chance to protect someone. You're it. Don't you ever doubt that. The words hung in the air between us, comforting and heavy all at once. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, but I swallowed them down. I was learning that in this harsh world, vulnerability could be both a danger and a thing of beauty. The days passed, and our strange routine continued. Grayson taught me more than just survival. He taught me about justice, how to read men, how to measure threats, how to extend mercy without showing weakness. The bond between us deepened, moving beyond just teacher and student into something more profound, something more real. In moments when I thought no one could hear, I started calling him father. He heard me, I know he did, but he never corrected me. Perhaps he had lost a son, but here, in the dusty streets of Deadwood, he had found another chance, unexpected and precious. But the calm couldn't last. One evening, a stranger rode into town. He was a man with a familiar, dangerous glint in his eye, and he carried a message that chilled Grayson to his core. The gang wasn't finished. They were coming back, and this time, they wouldn't leave without settling old scores. I sensed the shift in the air immediately. A knot in my stomach tightened like a trap. They're coming, aren't they? I asked, my voice small but steady. Grayson's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching in his cheek. Yes, he admitted. And soon. You must be ready, Eli. What happens next? It will test both of us. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters of the office. In the flickering lamplight, the sheriff and the boy, the father and the son, exchanged a look heavy with unspoken promises and looming danger. I realized then, with a mixture of fear and a strange certainty, that I wouldn't be alone when the storm finally arrived. I would face it with the man who had chosen me, the man who had become my father. And as the night deepened, the first shadow of the returning threat stretched across Deadwood, long and menacing, promising a trial that neither of us could avoid. Thanks for watching part 2. Stay tuned because the final confrontation is coming. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the conclusion. Dawn broke cold and pale over Deadwood, a thin frost clinging to rooftops and wagon wheels. The town seemed to hold its breath, as if it could sense the storm that crept steadily closer. Sheriff Grayson stood outside his office, and little Eli was right beside him. Together, they watched the horizon. A distant dust cloud was slowly rising horsemen, and more than just a handful. The final reckoning was coming. For a long moment, the sheriff didn't speak. Eli could feel the weight of his silence, the heaviness of a man preparing to finally face his past. Are you scared? Eli asked quietly, surprising even himself with the question. Grayson looked down at the boy, a faint, tired smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Of course, he said. Courage isn't the lack of fear, Eli. It's what you choose to do with it. The boy nodded, swallowing hard. He didn't feel brave, not in the way Grayson seemed to be. But he had learned enough to understand that standing beside someone you trust could make even the most terrifying moments bearable. As the riders drew closer, the townspeople began shuttering their windows and herding children inside. You could hear whispered prayers drifting through the cracks in the doors. Deadwood had seen its share of violence, but this threat felt different. It was calculated, personal. This wasn't just some gang looking to cause trouble. This was a vendetta, and it was aimed squarely at the sheriff. And now at the boy standing beside him. Grayson rested a firm hand on Eli's shoulder. Go inside, he said. Keep your head down unless I call for you. No, Eli said, his voice shaking but resolute. I'm staying. You said I have to learn when to stand. Grayson studied him for a long moment. What he saw in the boy's eyes reminded him, painfully, of his own son, a deep courage wrapped in innocence, a heart that was just yearning for belonging. With a slow nod, he relented. All right, but stay behind me. The gang stopped 20 yards from the sheriff's office, and the dust settled around them like the breath of some great beast. Their leader, a tall man with a jagged scar running from his brow all the way to his cheek, dismounted with a deliberate slowness. His dark eyes locked onto Grayson with a hatred that had been sharpened by years. Thomas Grayson, the man called out, his voice echoing through the silent street. You took something from me long ago. And now I've come to take something from you. His gaze flicked over to Eli. Seems you found yourself a new son. Fitting. Eli stiffened, a cold fear crawling up his spine. Grayson stepped forward, his gun hand relaxed but poised. Your grudge is with me, Marcus. Leave the boy out of this. Marcus just laughed, a bitter and cold sound. Your choices took my brother's life. A man doesn't forget that kind of debt. You know how it happened, Grayson said quietly. He gave me no choice. That's the story you tell yourself, Marcus spat into the dirt. Today we settle it. The standoff hung in the air like a held breath. For Eli, the world narrowed into a single, terrifying moment, sunlight glinting on metal, dust swirling like smoke, and Grayson's steady presence right beside him. Then the guns roared. Chaos erupted. Townsfolk ducked behind barrels and doorways as bullets tore through the street. Grayson shoved Eli toward the shelter of a water trough, firing measured shots, each one placed with a clear purpose. Marcus's men fanned out, trying to encircle him, but Grayson moved with a practiced instinct. He was protecting Eli, drawing their fire, never allowing the gang to gain an advantage. Eli crouched low, his heart hammering in his chest, watching Grayson's silhouette move with a terrifying kind of beauty. Every stance, every movement was a testament to years of survival and duty. But then he saw it. Marcus was circling behind a wagon, sneaking up on the sheriff with a knife glinting in his hand. Sheriff! Eli shouted. Grayson turned just in time, but not quickly enough. Marcus lunged. The blade slashed across Grayson's side and he staggered, pain flashing across his face. Eli didn't think. He just surged forward, grabbing a discarded piece of timber from the ground. With a desperate cry, he swung it hard at Marcus's arm. The impact was enough. The knife clattered to the ground. Grayson seized the opening, knocking Marcus backward with a single powerful blow. But the fight wasn't over. Marcus scrambled for his revolver, pure fury burning in his eyes. I'll finish what your justice started, he roared. Eli froze. Grayson stepped in front of him, shielding him. A gunshot cracked through the air. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Marcus collapsed, clutching his shoulder, his weapon falling uselessly into the dirt. Behind him stood the quiet widow from the general store, a rifle trembling in her hands. Her voice quavered as she said, "No more blood in this street." Shaken by their leader's fall and the resistance they clearly hadn't expected, fled into the hills. The echo of their retreating hooves faded away into the vast emptiness beyond the town. Eli ran to Grayson, fear gripping his heart as he knelt beside him. Blood was darkening the sheriff's shirt, but the wound, thankfully, was not mortal. Still, Eli's voice trembled. Don't die, please." Grayson placed a hand on the boy's cheek, his breath unsteady but sure. "I'm not going anywhere, Eli. Not if I've still got a son to raise." That word son had struck Eli like a sunrise breaking through storm clouds. It was warm, blinding, impossible. He leaned into the sheriff, tears spilling freely down his face, not of fear, but of relief, of acceptance, and of the unmistakable warmth of belonging. Days later, once the danger had passed and Grayson's wounds had begun to heal, the town gathered quietly in front of the sheriff's office. The judge handed Eli a small leather-bound document. "It's official," the judge said with a gentle smile. "Thomas Grayson has adopted you." Eli looked up at Grayson, his eyes bright with astonishment and pure joy. I have a father." Grayson knelt down, resting his hand on the boy's shoulder as he whispered. "And I have a son." The sun dipped low behind the black hills, turning the sky into a beautiful canvas of amber and rose. The sheriff stood with Eli on the steps of the office, a new page of life open right before them. Together, they watched the day fade, knowing that whatever storms lay ahead, they would face them side by side. They were no longer a lonely sheriff and a lost orphan, but a family. And as the last rays of light touched Deadwood, Eli leaned close and murmured the words that sealed their bond forever. "Thank you for finding me. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the heart of the Old West. We'll see you in the next one.